You are listening to Additional Crew Film Review with Nick Meyer and Andrew Gomez. These spoiler-heavy reviews are meant for entertainment purposes only. Please do not attempt anything said on this show at home. Now sit back, relax, and listen to these two dinguses talk about a movie. Enjoy! Came into this game for the action, the excitement. Go anywhere, travel light, get in, get out. Wherever there's trouble, a man alone. Now they got the whole country sectioned off. You can't make a move without a podcast. What's up, Andrew? How's it going, man?
Hey, it's going well, Nick. Hello, everyone.
Hello. This is our, I think our earliest recorded podcast. So,
yeah.
If you hear children in the background, I do apologize. It's the way it happens in a house where there's kids. This week we are bringing to you their second Terry Gilliam movie. We're going to talk about Brazil, review that. But first off, we've got a couple pieces of business we'd like to get to. First one being, Andrew has an album he'd like to talk about.
Yeah, in case people haven't been tuning in to what the Weeknd's been up to, he dropped a release at the end of January. It was postponed due to the fires in LA. It just didn't feel like a time to roll out an album when there was so much tragedy due to the fires. And I think he has he was having a Rose Bowl performance there, so he postponed the release of his album like a week or two after, and he finally dropped it on January 31st, 2025. And I will say, off the first listen, I was entranced. I was really digging the opening. Like, I think The Weeknd is one of those artists that just has a really strong way of opening his albums most of the time, at least in the last 3 albums he's released, those being After Hours, Dawn FM, and Hurry Up Tomorrow. Just real tone setters for the album, and this one is no different. Just kind of opens up with like very like thematic 80s energy, but very much in the style of The Weeknd. He got production help from Justice on that first song. Justice, if you're not too familiar with them, are a French electronic duo, kind of in the sound of Daft Punk, but more aggressive and more up to date with their sound. But they're very akin to one another with their sound, and you can hear the production of Justice. Like, Apple, and I'm pretty sure Spotify has been doing this where you don't get to see the features list on the track that's being played, like off like the first few days of listening to a new album, which is cool and unique because it gives you time to have this like natural curiosity of like, oh, was that who I think it was? Like, oh, this sounds like that, or like this sounds like some production from Justice, and like you are not 100% sure unless you go and research it and find out for yourself. But later, Apple and Spotify typically will start adding with features on the track listing. But I know in the first few days they don't. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, wow, this does sound like a Justice like instrumentals and production styling mixed in with The Weeknd, which was cool.
Can I ask you a quick question about Justice?
Yeah, what's up?
I had heard that there were rumors that Daft Punk wrote their first album. Is that true?
Well, where'd you hear that? I haven't heard that rumor, so I'm not too sure. And I haven't seen anything about that.
I saw a video of them talking about it where they said Daft Punk wrote their album, but I think they're being sarcastic, actually.
Oh yeah, I think people a lot, and maybe if they were saying that in jest, or they were being serious, you could see that they toe that line where they're not copying Daft Punk, but they're taking artistic liberties of doing what they've done and kind of heightening that sound and just pushing it forward more.
Mm-hmm.
And because there are similarities, but I think Justice is unique enough now, and they have such a deep discography now that they've been able to rip apart from the comparison.
Yeah, I'd seen Justice live once, and that was at the TBD Fest, the Weeknd.
Yeah, and great openers, some great singles. One standout track that like really got me excited to listen to the album because he dropped the single before or like right before he dropped the album. So I popped open and checked out Open Hearts, which he has some amazing music videos for, and something that's stylistically different than what a lot of other artists do with their music videos. He made it feel very movie-like and unique. Um, the one video I'm talking in particular with Open Hearts is like it seems surreal to have Jimmy Kimmel um, do like live from Jimmy Kimmel, this is the Weekend type introduction for the music video because it seemed like it's part of the show, but I don't think the Weekend was ever on the Jimmy Kimmel show to do this. So I think it was just like a surreal effect to where you think you're watching him perform live on Jimmy Kimmel because it like as the music video progresses, it transitions into a an evil landscape. Like you have to watch the music video to fully get the grasp of what I'm trying to tell you and what the Weeknd is trying to convey in this music video, which is quite. It gives me very much like an Inland Empire. Like that might be recency bias because we just saw Inland Empire, so I had that like mindset still fresh in my mind, and watching that music video really kind of heightened that um, level of surrealness in that music video. So what I want to say about this album most highly is that this album feels ready to be made into a movie, and I think that's what the Weeknd was going for in this album. Obviously, the songs bang, but I don't think it bangs as well as the other albums have done in the past. But with this album, it's basically a feature length album. Like it's like a feature length movie timed album because this album goes for like an hour and a half, like an hour 20 minutes of just straight music, and and, and that is a lot when it comes to enjoying an album because I don't typically have an hour and 20 minutes to sit from front to back with an album like this uh, on either a drive or like anywhere. Like I guess if you're doing a long road trip, this album works very well. But as far as like passive listening, I don't find myself wanting to go back to certain songs or like going back to like certain parts of the album because sometimes the one song works well with the other, and like I don't know, it's very packed with songs, and I listened to it once all the way through, but there was times where like I don't even know where I was in the track listing, or I didn't know where one song ended, one song stopped because it just started to become like a blur. Like I feel like this album has a lot, and does a lot of it well, but not compared to what I've been used to. So I think it's worth a listen, but I can understand if like all you did was like a few songs. And it's cool that he did this though, because like I said, he's getting ready to release a movie with this inspired by this album.
Okay.
So it should be interesting to watch that film because from what I'm getting from the music videos is anything what he's gonna do in the movie. I'm excited, and I do hope to go watch it, and it times well with our podcast because it would be one that I would probably consider watching for the podcast. But what's up?
Is this the Hurry Up Tomorrow? Is that the one we're talking about?
Yeah, and that's another thing. I think Abel is trying to not he's trying to write off the Weeknd. I think he's trying to send that um, artist, that legacy, set it set it to sail because it really felt like the end of the Weeknd, and I feel like he's trying to do that himself through his music. He's trying to like bookend the Weeknd.
Trying to like move on to something else, maybe like find a way
Yeah,
to release
I think
something
he's trying to
different.
rebrand himself as probably just Abel, because I think
Straight up, that was the that's a little embarrassing. That was the first time I think I've seen his actual real name would list it somewhere as
Abel
opposed to the
Tesfaye, yeah,
Weekend.
I
Yeah,
think he's because this album gives me and every album I feel like he's done has been heavily um it's not necessarily inspired, but like the sounds are feel so influenced by Michael Jackson. Like every time I put on a Weekend album, I feel like I'm listening to like sometimes a Michael Jackson production. I'm just like, and there is linear, correlations to both artists. Like both have worked with Quincy Jones. Both have done stuff with like artists that have worked with Michael Jackson. Have worked with, I believe, Abel, and so I think he's trying to make Abel Tesfaye a thing. Essentially, like he wants people to. This is my theory. This is my guess. This is not what I've read or seen, but this is my theory and my guess that he's trying to make Abel Tesfaye the name now. Like I think he's just trying to embody himself so that way his legacy is beyond the Weekend. It's within him. It's like within his name, Abel Tesfaye. Well, Michael Jackson is Michael Jackson. There's gonna be Michael Jackson. There's gonna be Abel Tesfaye. There's gonna be people who go by their born names. Want to
yeah,
be
that's hard to do,
yeah, it is hard to
especially
do sometimes.
yeah, especially when you've been known as the Weekend the whole time, and that's your whole entire brand, really. I mean, this. So I'm looking at this movie. It's supposed to have Barry Keoghan and Jenna Ortega as well, and it's about insomnia. And I don't know if you've watched anything with Barry Keoghan in it. His role in Saltburn was disturbing
I
in
liked him
like
in
the best way.
Saltburn. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was like I think my not my introduction to him, but my introduction to him as an actor and like in a feature length film because I think he's done cameos and other stuff I've watched, more specifically like the Batman.
I'd seen The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and he was really great in that too.
I've heard good things about that.
It's not like my favorite movie, but he was good in it. But the acting was all good in it. It's a very strange film. It's by the same guy who I did Poor Things. Pretty
Okay,
sure.
nice.
Yeah, Yorgos. But anyway, that's a side
Uh,
note. Great cast.
Last thing I'll say is I don't want to rate this album. I have not sat with it enough time. I'm definitely gonna go back and listen to the songs I like, which are Sao Paulo. I believe that's how you say that city name in Brazil, Sao Paulo. Open Hearts, the opening track, Wake Me Up. It was cool to see that Giorgio Moroder played a part on this album. For those who are unfamiliar, he has done stuff with Daft Punk, but more specifically, he's done stuff with some of the greatest movies of all times. Scarface.
Dude, that Scarface soundtrack
Is unbelievable. It's
push it
crazy.
to the limit, dude. He also helped write the Neverending Story theme song.
See, so just a well-renowned producer, musician. Like Big Sleep was a great song off that album. And yeah, if I was to do any type of ranking, I would go ahead and rank what, as of right now, what my favorite part of this trilogy has been. And for me, it probably starts with Dawn FM. I know a lot of people like After Hours way more, and that's, you know, understandable because it has probably a um, stronger singles from it. Like, I mean, Blinding Lights and Heartless are amazing songs. Blinding Lights especially, like there hasn't been a song that sounded so 80s and unique in a long time, and he captured that that sound and revamped it for the 21st century. Good on able to write such a amazing hook on that song. But After Hours does not go to the top for me in the trilogy. I would say Dawn FM is my strong point in the trilogy because it just worked better for me in as far as like a well-rounded listen. So Dawn FM, After Hours, and Hurry Up Tomorrow would be my trilogy ranking, and subject to change, but right now that's how it is. And again, give this album a listen if you haven't yet.
All right, I think that's it's pretty good. I'll come back to you on a score later. If I can remember, I'll ask you next pod.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, not that it matters, but you know. Okay, so just a couple more things before we get into the movie review. So I have watched and listened, I suppose, to a book. So I'm going to talk about Exorcist House. That's another Nick Roberts book. Now, on our last podcast, Inland Empire, I also talked about his book, Mean Spirited. Exorcist House is a book about how your past demons and guilt can haunt your conscious. So last pod I mentioned Mean Spirited. I enjoyed it enough that I listened to this one in the 2 weeks since we recorded. So if you can tell, these movies are kind of like these books are kind of like page turners. See, I called it a movie, but it's a book that I listened to, so we're getting all sorts of media formats listed here.
And you're saying page turner, but in reality, you're listening to it. So
exactly. So it's
a minute.
Again, if someone listens to this and knows what to call an audio book in reference to the actual book, let me know. I don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah.
Exorcist House was published in May of 2022, and it follows the story of a psychologist and his family moving into an old house where an exorcist was killed by a demon. There are some really strong sequences in this book, and most of them are surrounding the actual possession of the human body. Most of the characters are a bit hard to root for. The demon isn't like that scary, so the book isn't getting my highest of marks. It also has like a lot of the exorcism media tropes. Like if you watch exorcist movies or exorcism movies or demon movies at all, it's like you kind of know what they're gonna throw at you here. And it also doesn't really mind throwing its own inner logic out the window when it needs to do something cool, which is always a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. Like, yes, they can not do anything in the physical world until I really need them to do something in the physical world. Now they can do it in this one specific moment. And the book does that. So it's like, I wouldn't necessarily call it a plot hole as much as I would say like a logic break. But overall, this is getting a 5.5 on my arbitrary book review rating scale. That's with the caveat that if exorcism and demons are your thing, you'll actually probably enjoy this. It's not bad. It's just not exceptional. I would say if you're looking to get into Nick Roberts, definitely start with the book I reviewed last time, Mean Spirited. That one was far more interesting. This one was more like, it felt like someone getting their feet under them as a writer. This might have been his first book. I didn't do enough research to say that for sure, but it felt like that.
What's his name? Nick what?
Roberts. And also, you can tell this dude really likes dogs.
Why is that?
He just really writes a lot about dogs, and it's always very positive. Even when the dog was being haunted and mean-spirited. This is a guy who likes his dogs.
Mean Spirited was second. It was 2024, and you said The Exorcist House?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was 2022, like you said.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's anything before that. This doesn't really feel like it. Like it was good.
Anathema?
Dema.
It's 2020.
So there was something before then. It's not like a strong book, but it was entertaining enough that I was able to finish it. I didn't feel bored during the book at all. It just didn't present me with any like strong new ideas, you know?
Yeah, I think that was his first book, Anathema, so maybe he was still getting the feel of how to write a published book.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, if you're gonna like publish a bunch of books quick, the pandemic wasn't a bad time to do it.
Yeah.
Now I hear that you've watched a few movies in the meantime.
I'll start off with Bodies by Helena Ray Jin. The screenplay was by Sarah Delap. For me, when I watched it after the fact, I felt like it wasn't necessarily like a creepypasta styling, but it felt like a very um fan fiction styling of like a movie. Like it's like a simple concept of uh like a childhood game that goes com- completely wrong. And I say that completely wrong because like the reasoning, I won't ruin the film. I feel like this, well, what I was about to say was gonna ruin the film. But what I'll say is just like there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, and I guess in some way it makes the movie work because the less you, by the end of the movie, you just feel kind of like stupid sometimes because you're like, why did I give a shit about what happened just now? Because the ending is kind of dumb, but it works in such a dumb level that like you roll your eyes, but then you think like, I guess that's the best way to end this dumb movie. And I say dumb in like an almost positive way because I could see even the actors seeing like what they just made was dumb, but at the same time they probably enjoyed it being on the set and like they would look like they had fun. So I guess in some ways that's good for them. It does drag on a little bit um, at times, and the acting isn't powerful. I would just say it's just very much driven by your curiosity of how this movie is gonna end. So take that as you may. Um, what else was I gonna say about this movie? The acting was, like I said, not the best, but I really enjoyed Rachel Sennett's character. I don't know how to say her last name. She was
Senate, I think is it. I think you got it.
Rachel Sennett. Yeah, she's very funny in it. Pete Davidson wasn't too annoying in this film, and he wasn't in it all that much, so that kind of helped too. I'm not trying to hate on Pete Davidson, but I know a lot of people. It's like a love or hate for that guy as far as like his acting chops because he has range in some aspect because I've seen it in a couple movies. Um, it's just very much like I don't give a shit on screen type attitude, and if that's not if that rubs you off the wrong way, I can understand that because like, dude, why aren't you trying? Like, give a shit about something, and his characters always play that for me in these movies, and it's kind of like that in this one. Um, everyone else I've never heard of before, and those were the two characters that stood out. And I just wanted to throw this on. Like, it was just a random movie that was on Tubi, so I threw it on. And again, not the worst thing I've seen all year, but definitely like not the best. I have some notes I want to say. I'm trying to find them, but have you seen this movie, Nick? Bodies, Bodies, Bodies.
Yeah, I actually watched it in the Alamo Draft House one time. I was in Texas, and I thought, yeah, it wasn't like the greatest film I've seen, but I did actually laugh a pretty good amount throughout. Was Rachel Sennett? Was she the one who did the public college speech?
What part was that? I don't remember her talking about
Where she was crying about her childhood trauma, and she was talking about her parents were, or someone was like, "But your parents were both professors. You had it pretty well off." And she said, "But they were part of a public university."
Oh no, I think that was one of the other girls who was like, uh, that may have been Jordan, whose name I'm not gonna try to pronounce, but yeah. I think Rachel Sennott was the girl who was always wearing the like glow in the dark sticks, and she had that funny line about like, um, it's really difficult to start a podcast. You guys,
No, that was her then, because she was the
okay,
podcast lady. Yeah, because she was always talking about how much childhood trauma she had, and they're like, "You had like basically none." I had it's Janice's niece, right? So like I call her my niece because we've been together for so long. But she's like the age that the people in this movie would be, and I laughed pretty hard because like they did remind me a lot of her.
she talks like them and acts like
Yeah,
them.
Yeah, I was like, I know exactly like the little time range of ages this movie fits between, and I've seen it, and it feels pretty accurate for like shit they would say when they're trying to be taken seriously.
Sure. That's
Which every time period's got that thing, right? So this isn't like a full on mark against these guys. It's just that this movie was made for, I think, that time, that age range at that time.
Yeah, that type of audience will will have a better time watching this than someone who's outside that time range.
Mm-hmm. I think it was a fun movie. Like it didn't blow my mind. The twist was like, and I won't say what it was, but like it wasn't shocking. It was kind of maybe shocking for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, like I said, dumb. It is so dumb sometimes.
But
felt so avoidable. But
yeah, A24 in comedy has like an interesting mixture right now, and it has for a while. It's like it's either there for you or it's not.
One thing I will say is I have a kettlebell in my room, and after watching that movie and seeing my kettlebell again, it was jarring, but at the same time, like it reflected on the movie. Like I can't see kettlebell sometimes the same way because there's a use of a kettlebell in that movie that isn't completely shocking, but it's funny how they used it. Like, oh, that's an interesting way to use a kettlebell. So if you're curious, go check it out. Yeah, as far as some rating goes, I give this like a 5 out of 10 for story, 5 out of 10 for like drama suspense, and 4 out of 10 for comedy. So if you're bored in the house bored, check it out. It's a 5 out of 10 total.
Sick. You had some other movies you wanted to talk about too. Do you want to do that right?
Just quickly, I just want to rant about one of them days. I saw it in theaters alongside Companion, did like a double feature. And yeah, I'll start with Companion. Written and directed by Drew Hancock. It was produced by Zach Kreger and some others. I say Zach Kreger specifically because he also, I think, directed and wrote Barbarian. I'm checking that out right now. Yeah, he directed and wrote, but he didn't produce Barbarian. And Barbarian was one of those hidden gems of 2022 that really has stuck with me after the fact. Like anyone who hasn't watched Barbarian, go check it out, but don't do any research. Go into that movie blind. It's probably the best way to watch that film, Barbarian. But with this new one, Companion, directed by Drew Hancock, like I said, it's kind of playing into like the whole AI robot mechanic. I think that's pretty. I think that was apparent in the trailer. Sorry for that little spoiler, but I don't think it's a spoiler. It's pretty quick into the movie that you.
I think it's on the poster for the film. So
yeah, find someone made just for you is the tagline, and enjoyable. Just quickly before I forget, because I forgot what the last one. I think it was like Bodies was budget was $3 million, and they made like $10 million at the box office. And with this one, their budget was $10 million, and they have made $3.3 million as of this recording. So good on them. They've both made their money back, and it hasn't been seen as a flop.
And I will say, $33 million.
Yeah, 33 million is not seen as a flop. So people have gone to watch it. It felt very much like a Valentine's Day-esque movie to watch in theaters. So good on them. It's not very horror. It's more based off like suspense and thriller. And yeah, worth a watch. I would probably. This is very arbitrary. I'm not this like I have no rubric for this one, but just based off what I saw, and I would recommend this film again to anybody who wants to check it out. It's not like gonna, have you talking about it and willing to go share it with somebody, but I feel like you'll be entertained. So like 6 out of 10.
Okay. Now I want to segue for just a second. So Sophie Thatcher, she's the lead in this movie. I haven't seen Companion, so I will talk specifically about Companion. But she was also in Maxine the Boogeyman and Heretic, as well as the show Yellow Jackets. So Sophie Thatcher about to blow up, dude.
No, yeah, Heretic. Somebody have told me that was it you like that was telling me that the movie was really good.
I gave it a good rating. It wasn't like very good, but it was worth a watch. I mean, it was Hugh Grant as a villain, you know, and then Sophie Thatcher, the same lead in this one as your heroine, along with Chloe East. So like it was a good plot, kind of. I had mixed reviews about it, but it was a pretty decent movie. I watched a film on Shudder called Grafted. It's from 2024. It's a pretty new one. It's like one part Face Off and one part The Substance. And if you just mash those together, you get this movie Grafted. So it was a pretty neat movie, and it has pretty cool special effects and sequences. And it wasn't afraid to get dirty. It's a movie about the daughter of a scientist. Both the daughter and her father have a birthmark on their faces, actually pretty similar to that of the little girl in Brazil. The father attempts to fix it and accidentally ends up killing himself in a pretty gruesome fashion. We fast forward to the child moving to America and becoming an outsider, but she keeps continuing her father's research, and also find that when she continues the research, it leads to gruesome results. Without spoiling a ton of it, like, it's just a movie where someone who has good intentions ends up going completely off the rails and like losing themselves in this attempt to get those good results. So it's a movie. It does a lot right, but it kind of fails to dig in with a deeper meaning. And somehow, even though it's got really cool imagery and action scenes, and it's pretty enjoyable, it doesn't feel like it has resonance. Like it just kind of it's there, and then as soon as you turn it off, it's like, oh, that was a movie. It's over.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a strange thing to say about a movie that I thought was actually pretty good. But unlike The Substance, where you could find something underneath it, in this one, it doesn't really feel like you got more than what you were seeing.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10, and this isn't like an ultra negative on the movie. It was a very enjoyable watch. It's just one that I don't have anything exceptional. It was like straight down the middle, down the board.
Yeah, just a film. You know, there's not a lot of take home.
Mm-hmm. I think that like what happens in a movie like this is that there's opportunities to make it a great movie, and then it just doesn't capitalize on them. It just takes the easy route, and then you end up watching something and you're like, well, it had the opportunity to say something really cool and it didn't. But the movie that it showed me was still a good movie.
When did it come out?
Last year, 2024. I think it came out like right around the same time as The Substance, which is actually shocking because some of the imagery is very similar to that of The Substance. So whoever, let's see, the director was Sasha Rainbow, and the writers were Lee Murray, Sasha Rainbow, and Mia Mara. And these folks must be on a pretty similar page as the folks who wrote The Substance.
Okay. Where was this on? Where'd you watch it at?
Shudder.
Okay.
Yeah. Worth the watch. I'm like if you're in the mood for something that's not going to stick with you, and you just want to watch a horror movie that just is there. It's a fine movie to do it with. It almost might be good to have like a bunch of friends over and just watching this movie in the background, because you can talk about and do other things and not miss much.
I'm not sure if I gave a score for Companion. If I did, it was during my panic moment of looking for my.
Yeah, throw a score out for Companion.
Yeah, I think I would. If I said it earlier, I'm contradicting myself. Oops, my bad. I'd probably give this also like a 5 out of 10 for Companion. Like nothing bad to say about the film, but nothing great. Like check it out if you have time. And then the last thing I'll talk about for movies is One of Them Days. Like I said, double feature. Checked it out. Our friend wanted to see it, so we decided to go check it out. And so it was directed by Lawrence Lamont, written by Sarita Singleton. And then the big thing about this was like it was being touted as produced by Issa Rae. And for those unfamiliar with Issa Rae, she's most notable for Insecure, which is a decent show. Actually, I got to the last season and never got back to watching it, but up until that point, it was good. Maybe one of these days I'll go back and checking it out.
One of these days, I got it. What you did there?
Good catch, yeah. And then the budget on this is 14 million, and the box office is 44, so just killed it as far as like February watch. I think February is one of those months that's kind of hard for people to sell a movie, essentially. But at the same time, it's like a hard and easy sell because it's hard because I feel like there's not as much. There's a lot going on in February a lot of times. So a lot of people are distracted from wanting to go to the movie theaters because you have like the Super Bowl, you have the Oscars, you have a bunch of stuff happening in February, crazy enough. And so like, going to a film isn't really an option, like the big thing you want to do outside of like Valentine's Day. I feel like people want to go to the movie theaters on Valentine's Day. But actually, this movie came out January 17th. So it's been a while since this movie came out. I recently just watched it though. Like 2 weeks ago.
I think it had a pretty good marketing campaign too. Like it seemed like they were trying to promote it as a movie that was like an event, just because of like the people who were in it.
Yeah, Keke Palmer.
I'm
not too familiar with Keke Palmer stuff. I didn't grow up watching her stuff. I guess she's like a child actress. I think maybe she was. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember when she was in Nope, and everyone was really excited about it. I also am not overly familiar.
I'm not. Nope. I didn't watch Nope.
Yeah, well, we don't need to go into Nope. It's okay.
And then SZA is actually decent in the film. Like she's not known for her acting. She's mostly known for being an R&B artist. But she did decent. Didn't feel like she was underselling her character or just trying to oversell it. Just decent acting on her part. I will say it's not all that funny to me. Like there's parts that are funny, but mostly because it's like that's really dumb what I'm seeing on screen. So I laugh at like how stupid this all is sometimes. And I know I've been saying that a lot about these movies, but honestly, that's just the way I watch movies sometimes. If it's like really dumb, I'll just laugh at it because it's just that shit doesn't make any sense, but it's funny enough. And so the lines did not hit. It was what I saw on screen that hit for the most part. The writing didn't make me laugh all that much. Some parts did, but I won't go into all that. It just very much felt like Woman Friday. Like, we need to get money. How do we do it in the next 24 hours? It's kind of like the concept of Friday when Smokey was trying to get money for Big Worm to pay him off. They basically took Friday and it's like, how do we modernize it? Let's do the Ghostbuster remake of it, but call it.
At least they called it a different name. Like you can do that if you got a simple enough concept, you can make it anything, right?
True. I mean, so that's what works for them in that aspect. Like they're trying to make a Friday, but I don't think it landed that well. And for that, I'm giving this like 3.5, 4 out of 10. I'm not gonna watch it again, but I wasn't mad after watching it. I wasn't.
Fair.
Nothing to take away.
Do you have any other movies you're gonna talk about?
No, that was all I had.
All right, then real quick before we get into Brazil, I'm just gonna give out a shout out to the new Richard Dawson record, End of the Middle. I've never listened to Richard Dawson before. I listened to the song Not off this new record, and it completely took me surprised. I ended up really loving this album. So shout out to Richard Dawson. Check out End of the Middle. It's I don't want to call it like full on folk, but it's pretty close, and it's one of the few records of that type that just hit me, and it was phenomenal.
Where did you find this? Just like
on Fridays. While I'm at work, I make a playlist of like a bunch of new releases that come out, and then I just listen to them on shuffle. And if something hits. So the song Not hit really well for me. Also, the new Frog album hit pretty good. It's like 1,000 variations of the same song. It's a good album as well.
It sounds like Hurry Up Tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to listen to the Frog is like almost like early Modest Mouse is what it reminds me of.
haven't listened to any Modest Mouse except Float On. So
Yeah, this is a little different. It's like Midwestern emo, but with like a little bit more of a backwoods twang. That's what I would consider Frog. And then Richard Dawson is just straight up like Northern England folk music, but for some freaking reason it works so well. And he's got a very interesting writing style. So if you're in the mood for folk, check out Richard Dawson.
And with that,
With that said, we're going to talk about a movie from 1985. It's about a bureaucrat in a dystopic society. Dystopic, whatever. He becomes an enemy of the state as he pursues the woman of his dreams. We're, of course, talking about Terry Gilliam's 1985 flick, Brazil. The second Terry Gilliam film we are talking about on this podcast. And it is quite a journey. So we've got our main character, Sam Lowry. He is played by Sir Jonathan Pryce. Now, I know that because I've read a lot of quotes where they will not cease to call him Sir. So I think he's been knighted. He is searching after Kim Greist, Jill Layton in this film. And he doesn't really know why, except for that in his dreams that exists. So now, some context for this movie is that Terry Gilliam was making the Imagination trilogy, and I think you've talked about that, right?
what was that? Sorry.
It was like, from what I read, he was making the Imagination trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so like Time Bandits was Imagination as a child, Brazil's Imagination as a middle-aged dude, and what is the Adventures of Baron Munchausen, or the Adventures of an Old Guy, the Imagination of an Old Guy. So that's just some context, because that already immediately gives like an understanding of like what sort of mindset you're in here. Is you are in Jonathan Pryce's mindset. He's a middle-aged 30-something dude who's just working and thinking about how he could get out of his scenario. I mean, that's why we have these dream scenes where he's flying in the suit of armor, dressed up like a WWE wrestler.
Yeah, it gave off like a superhero styling, larger than life character.
Now, this is the second time I've watched this movie. The first time I watched it, I was probably 17, 18. And it's kind of shocking. One thing that I'm going to say about this film to start off with is that I don't know if it's the age. I don't know if it's the current events that we're living through. I don't know what it is. But this movie has given me a completely different tone the second time I watched it. The first time I watched it, I picked up on the comedy aspect pretty strongly. This time, it didn't even feel funny. Like, to me, it felt like the tone was, if you take this like funny, lighthearted tone from something like Monty Python and you play it over something that's actually vaguely disturbing, you get this kind of like uneasy feeling. And it almost feels like this uneasy feeling goes the whole way through, because you're watching all these people who seem like they should be funny and they should be lighthearted and it should be kind of hilarious, but instead there's such real repercussions to what they're doing that it's no longer funny. And you see that through this film where it's like everyone's kind of a buffoon. Everyone is kind of like shitty at what they do, and they're bad at it, but they're so easily able to be like, but don't worry, what I do doesn't mean anything. It's actually the other guy's fault.
And are you kind of reference the wiremen, the people who come up by? And...
It's in my opinion, it was everyone in this film. They were also like removed from their surroundings, that they were all just like able to go like, yeah, it's someone else's deal, it's someone else's problem, someone else's fault, and it almost gives like a more unsettling feeling to this film, because it feels like it's lighthearted comedy. Everyone's a buffoon, but you're watching this buffoonery end up in real life pain in the movie. Not real life, but
yeah, because this movie like kickstarts with someone's. Well, I guess it's seen more as an error than buffoonery, when the guy who's trying to get rid of the fly in the room kills it, but the fly lands into the typewriter, which causes the whole mix-up of Tuttle and Buttle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because is Mr. Buttle, is that Robert De Niro's character?
Mr. Buttle is the guy who they take away from his family during Christmas.
Yeah.
And Tuttle is Robert De Niro's character. So they were originally going to get Tuttle, but because of that mix-up, they ended up taking that guy from his family.
Okay, so that's what happened because Robert De Niro's character is a Tuttle.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're saying? Why are there so many Tuttles?
I don't know. What Tuttle seems to be very important in this film because he understands how to service machinery, and that goes against the corporate wants of CS, which I'm forgetting the what the acronym was for. Is like not customer service or certified something, but CS, the company that did all the maintenance on the air conditioning units. That is apparently illegal to manipulate. Otherwise, you have this guy who knows how to manipulate them, and he just does it for free, and that's really the reason he's a terrorist / an issue / a problem, is that he was like a freelance something. Oh well. But basically, he went against corporate interests because he was willing to fix things and fix it correctly, and quickly when people needed it, as opposed to waiting for the one company to get out there and have all the proper forms. And that's why he was considered a terrorist. Because I think with Tuttle in particular, we see that sequence where he's an actual terrorist, right?
Which part?
When our main character Sam is in the torture chair, and then Harry Tuttle comes down from the top to save him. But that turns out to be all a dream sequence.
Yeah, there's so many parts that like play like reality, so sometimes I get kind of lost, and like they do a good job of like not making it confused. But when we're trying to recap what's fully going on in the movie, and you're trying to remember which part was real, which part was fake, it's kind of hard. On the spot thinking. Mm-hmm. Like in the movie, it's very apparent. It's like they make it pretty easy for you to like keep track of when you're like in a dream state and when you're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for me, I think the imagination aspect is really just the dream sequences, and when he's on the torture chair, and Jack's about to start torturing him, and he just completely goes off the rails, and he starts imagining the terrorist takeover and that he becomes part of the terrorists. Then he gets out with Jill, and that's all just fake in his mind. But this is an interesting setup for a film, because what I was originally thinking was, what are Sam's true motivations here, right? So Sam's a guy who stays at the Ministry of Information. He likes his job because it doesn't really have to do much. He has these dreams of going out and like having different sorts of freedom. And everyone around him wants him to just get promoted and keep on moving up through the bureaucracy, right?
Yeah, he's a Nepo baby.
And all he wants is to find this lady that he dreams about.
But at first he doesn't even know who she is. Like, he sees her in reality, and he's like, that person looks familiar. Like, where do I know that person from? Because it's later that he starts to see her more and more in his dreams. That like, oh, that is the woman. But I think when he first seen her, he's like, it's like kind of when you have moments of deja vu. You don't fully grasp what you're seeing until like after the fact, like, oh shit, this feels very familiar. At least for me.
And so yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's like he has that moment, and he realizes where it's from. But like his completely unhealthy obsession immediately with this woman is like such a driving force of this movie, because realistically, Sam at any point could have just stopped until he hit the point where he was in the truck and they went through the barricade, I think. You know, like he didn't have to take the promotion to go up to Ministry of Information Retrieval. He didn't have to like run away from his job and then get in the truck. But then especially when he was like, you got to keep going through the barricade. And then he finally sees the consequences of his own actions, that it breaks him. But it's all because of this obsession with Jill Layton.
Yeah, and it tells you that people would do anything for love, man. That guy was searching for love. And that was the thing that was driving him at that point, because he is ready to live his life where he was with what's his face, Ian Holmes' character, Mr. Kurtzman. Hey, is that who it is? It says Sam's boss. That was Sam's boss. That was his.
Yeah, that's Sam's boss. Mm-hmm.
Like,
That was his boss, like the completely incompetent guy who doesn't even like understand the forms he's signing anymore. Can't even open I forget what it was that he couldn't open, but he's like trying to open something, he like hurts his wrist.
oh yeah.
And
That was
once
like he was trying to sign for the sign his for his name. Like he was trying to sign for him.
oh right, he couldn't even sign for it. His wrist hurt too much. He's like, what a pathetic human I am, or what a pathetic being I
Yeah.
am. And it's moments like these where I think like Brazil really like Terry Gilliam in Brazil really shine, is because it's this sort of like subtle ideology that's happening behind this, word showing that like all these people who are in charge of these systems that matter so much to other people are just completely incompetent, almost completely unable of doing anything for themselves, and yet they've been put in charge. And when they make mistakes, it really hurts the people who are living out there. And that's where we see the Buttles come into it so often, when he has to go deliver the check to Mrs. Buttle.
Mrs. Buttle, yeah.
Because they took away Mr. Buttle and they accidentally, quote unquote, deleted him, deceased
In the
him.
most chaotic way.
Right?
It seemed unnecessary the way they just fucking hijacked their husband on Christmas.
The imagery of that, it really works for me too, because it was like very imaginative and very crazy, but like those suits are extremely kind of terrifying, and especially the way they hang them up from the ceilings. So like you just jump in, you put the suit on a person, and you just rope them up to a ceiling immediately.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Like they had him in basically a straitjacket and put a rag on him, and so like, all for what? Where were they gonna send him off to?
So they sent him off to Jack, which was Sam's friend, who was the torturer. Michael Palin is the actor's name, and that's the one that Jack was talking about. If you remember, he's like, well, they didn't get the right guy, but I got the right guy because I got the guy they told me they got. And he was talking about Mr. Buttle because he tortured him to death because he didn't give up the terrorists. And of course he didn't give up the terrorists because he was just a random dude that was picked up because of a typewriter error. But he got tortured to death because he couldn't answer about terrorists. But then the guy who tortured him to death was still blaming someone else, even though he was the one who physically did the torturing, because he got the guy he was supposed to get. It was the other guys who didn't get the guy they were supposed to get that were the issue. And as I was watching this, what I really liked is that Terry did a really great job. And I'm talking about the director / writer, Terry Gilliam. He did a really great job at making sure every character had someone to pass the buck off to. Every single one. The only person who didn't was Harry Tuttle. And he was the guy who kept saying, we're all in this together. And he was the only one who was fixing things. Because he was the only one taking responsibility for anything. And every single person otherwise was all like, well, that's not my fault. Just make sure that's not my fault. Someone else did their job wrong, and that's what happened here.
What's it called? Was Harry? Do you think Harry was a big part of the storyline? Like he was a big part of the storyline. I'm not trying to say that, but like, do you think he was written after the fact? Because I'm looking through these Wikipedia files, and they're saying that like Robert De Niro wanted to play Jack Lance, but he didn't get the role. So Terry Gilliam offered him a smaller role as Harry Tuttle, but that doesn't necessarily mean like Harry Tuttle was never supposed to be part of the film, right? Like he was always supposed to be. He just passed it off to Robert De Niro's character.
Yeah. There's a lot of other issues with Robert De Niro in this role. Like he also was in another role at the time that he was contracted to be in, so he wasn't even allowed to be on promotional material for Brazil. Like he wasn't supposed to be in this movie.
Oh wow!
Because the contract had like I don't want to call it a non-compete, but it had some deal where he was in a different film at the same time. I do think Harry Tuttle was always a part of it, but I don't think like realistically if you think about his impact
To the film.
it's pretty high for the amount of lines this guy really has and the amount of screen time he really has, because he's not on the screen that often. But he sets into motion a lot of things that really matter. And by that I mean, like, when he fixes the air conditioning, as stupid as that is and sounds, him fixing the air conditioning ends up with Sam out of his apartment and kicked out of his apartment.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes and no, because those other buffoons that worked for like the electrical company came in and finally got the forms and started working on his place without his consent. Right?
But
He walked to his room and like those wires just hanging out everywhere.
Yeah, they did that because once they found out that it had been illegally tampered with, they were no longer required to fix it. So that's why they like pulled out the thing and they're like, haha, we found out you illegally tampered. Now we can just leave it like this. This is your fault now, not our fault. Which again, passing off the blame, passing off the buck, except for onto the customer this time, you know. That whole sequence where he fixes the issue so simply and they end up destroying every single thing just to find out how he fixed it wrongly is just like point of like, if you don't do it the way that the corporation wants you to do it, then no matter how you fix it, you're wrong, and they will destroy it to make sure that you're not seen as right. So and that's part of it, is that Harry Tuttle coming in and fixing it, even though what he had did was correct. He ended up, in a way, this is like, I don't want to sound like victim blaming of a guy who just fixed the thing, right? Because that's exactly what it is. But like, that's also what the movie's trying to show, is that like they blame the guy who fixed the thing for ultimately destroying it because the company came in and destroyed it themselves. They're like, this is illegal freelance work. You're not allowed to do that. The only people who are allowed to do that are certified technicians, and who choose the certified technicians? The corporation does. You don't choose it.
Yeah.
One thing, and as you're going through this, is you'll find that like I found that a lot more of this came a little bit more true than I think it should have.
What's that?
Because like, I think this idea of like the air conditioning and all this being broken reminds me of how like a lot of the things that we have now aren't meant to be owned. You know, like the air conditioning is not Sam's, it's the building's air conditioning, and that's why he can't fix it, even though it immediately affects him.
Yeah.
You know, like you just like lose control over all the things in your life. And then the only people who have control are the corporations and the government. And that's like what it's showing in this. And it's just showing out how incompetent every single person is, and how when no one can be blamed for anything, almost anything can happen.
I mean, yeah, that's the scary part of like the beginning, that like being I don't know, hoisted from your house off of a simple error is scary to think that can, in some realities, that happens where people get commonly mistaken, common identity mistaken of like you think you're you think you're someone else, and so you take the fall for somebody else, but in reality, it's not your fault. Like that's something plausible that could happen in today's day and age, where like a simple error causes someone's whole life to spin out of control.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, like they show that they were charging people for being arrested. It's like if you were arrested and it cost them like resources to do an investigation and to hold you in the cell and to like have your trial and to have the torture, you were charged for all these things. Because that's kind of what kicks off the refund check, is that Harry Buttle had gotten charged too much money. So they wanted to go refund him some of his money, but he was dead. And again, it's one of those things that like, that sounds awful, right? That should never be true. But like here in Oregon, you can get charged for each day you stay in jail.
That's crazy.
And it's like, it doesn't matter. And I mean jail, not prison.
That's crazy because like, if they really did commit the crime, they should be able to have to pay for all the stuff that goes along with paying for that crime, including board and food. They should be the ones paying for the food if they're the ones criminally charged and found guilty. But if not, like, why am I fronting this bill? Like,
yeah. I mean, you know, like the found guilty, like I won't go too far into it, but like you almost never really get a trial. That's not how these things like super work. You almost like hit with the anyway. We won't go there. But parts of this, I'm like, okay, watching this as an adult now, I get a lot where this was going because I see a lot of how this is very true. Like all of a sudden, you filled out an application wrong, and you're just like, "Oops, fees. Oops, fines. Oops, you're in trouble." And it's like, okay, hold on, hold on. I need what stamp for what thing. I need which department to take what thing. It's just like made purposefully confusing, and so that way you can never really feel like you get footing. And that's what like this whole movie is like if everything in the world is made purposefully confusing, at what point have you just lost the plot and you've lost control? There's like some other parts in this movie that I think were like really interesting as well, and shown in a very interesting way. Like I like the wealth disparity and how that was shown, right? So like the people who were in the wealthy stratosphere, so let's say Sam's mom and her friends,
Yeah.
they were at these fancy places, and even as they were getting like bombed and attacked and everything, they were
Yeah.
still just like cut off from the rest of the world. They're like, oh, don't worry, nothing's happening here. Don't worry about what's happening to them. It won't happen to you guys, so you're fine. Eat your food, enjoy, have your nice stuff.
That's crazy.
Everything's
Yeah,
fine.
that happened completely out of the blue. They're just trying to enjoy a meal, and Sam is being pushed to order by a number. Like he's just telling them what he wants, but he's like, "Please say the number." Like these people operate with such rigidness and such like formalities that anything outside of the normal order of things can't be said and done.
Mm-hmm. Everything is so rigid, but the ones who are like deciding the rigidity are not very smart, right? So you like have to fit within this little teeny box.
Yeah,
Where
you
it's
have to
like,
take out their rules.
yeah, and
The rules don't make sense sometimes.
and like the people who have the means to change that are completely cut off from the rest of the world. They don't even know what's going on. It's like with the wealthy people who they don't understand what's happening, but the poor people have no means to change that, and they're just getting dragged away and taken to the Department of Information Retrieval with no say. They've got nothing to do it. They're charged for it. Meanwhile, every single government department and government worker can just say like, "It's not my fault. We have this dissonance. It's someone else's fault. It's someone else down the line who messed it up. We're not hurting anyone. We're trying to protect someone." And it just leads to this like crazy world, because then what you see with Sam, and I really like this too, is when Sam is on the truck and he has the house behind him, right? And the house falls off and it blocks off those guys who are chasing him. That house blows up when one of the vehicles crashes into it. And then he sees the police officer walking out of the building on fire, right? And that moment to me is it's such an interesting and unique moment, because you see Sam for the first time actually watch the consequences of his actions.
Mm-hmm.
Like before this, it had always been someone else's fault. Someone else did it. He was always trying to protect people. But in this moment, he got too excited. He got too happy about something, and then he watched someone get hurt from what he did.
Oh, snap.
And that was like the moment where his like, I think like his psyche almost broke to the way the world was. It's like he's like, oh shit, so all this stuff we're doing is actually hurting people. And he had kind of had that moment a little bit with Mrs. Buttle, because he had gone to her and she had been like, what did you do with my husband? He's like, I didn't do anything. That was somebody else. I didn't do anything. And then she just kept saying, what did you do with my husband? And then in the dreams he's having, he starts seeing her as like this form of like a funeral. I don't know. She's like a grieving widow. And she's in the dreams talking to him, and she's just saying the same thing. What have you done with my husband? What have you done with my husband? What have you done with my husband? And I think this is like a visual representation of that dissonance that exists in these people. So the dissonance being that on one hand, their actions are directly leading to consequences, right? But they're telling themselves that it's something else that's happening. And so when you get into his psyche, you can see that his psyche, it knows that these are consequences of his action and is bearing down on him harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
And he keeps running from that feeling. And it was just shocking to me, like how, I'm gonna just say it, I think Terry Gilliam put together an amazing world. Like it was so out there and wild, and you can see how it evolved from Time Bandits to Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
and it was so imaginative that it felt like a completely different place. Like it didn't
Oh,
feel like
definitely.
the world we're in. Like when they're doing the car chase, and it's got all these like industrial buildings in between it that are all completely just made up sets with made up cars chasing it. It's such a fantastical scene. But then he also has such a good way to kind of like tie it back to the real world in like the areas where they're going through the highways with the billboards on each side, and the billboards have like the nice imagery of like mountain streams and trees and
Yeah,
mountaintops. But if you go right past the billboard, it's all just mines.
exactly. Like there used to be a world that existed like that, but now all you're surrounded is corporations and industries and factories.
Mm-hmm.
Like the beauty in this world doesn't exist anymore.
Right. This is like the ultimate, like, okay, we've destroyed it all, and now we just are trying to keep y'all in line. It reminds me of something like, I don't know if you played Cyberpunk, the game.
No.
No, it does remind me a lot of that. And what I'm seeing with Brazil is that I don't think it gets quite the credit it should as a dystopian fiction. Because you hear all the time about like Fahrenheit 151, 1984, Paradise Lost. I don't think Paradise Lost is the one. I think that's an old British book. But anyway, you don't really hear as much about Brazil, and yet for some reason Brazil strikes me as one of the more true versions of dystopia.
Yeah, because I think also Mad Max falls into that where the world is basically collapsed, and what's left over is someone in high power controls everything. I feel like that's the Ministry of Information, right? Or is that what called Ministry of Information?
I think that was the Ministry of Information Retrieval,
Oh, okay.
which I think they were named very similar to be confusing. I think that was the point.
They're the ones in power per se, right? They're the ones who are making all the decisions for these people. Like what's Miss Ija Lowry? That's the mother. Uh, what's her role as far as
I think she's just like a wealthy socialite. So all her role in this whole entire thing is just having money. So she's like allowed into the power roles and allowed undue influence just because she's wealthy. Whereas, yeah, you have like people like her husband and Mr. Helpman, who I believe it was they served in a war together. Mr. Helpman's got a lot of power, but he still listens to the mom and hires Sam just because of that influence. Just because of the Nepo baby part. There's no other reasoning for it.
interesting. Yeah, people don't bring this movie up all that often. Like I haven't really heard much from people when they say they've watched this film when I bring it up. And the only other person who I know has watched it is a coworker of mine who let me borrow their account to even watch this movie on Apple Plus. So thanks for that. Appreciate you allowing me to use your account so I can watch this film. Um, he had watched it back in the day, and he had pointed out to me the intro music being something I would recognize. And unfortunately, I did not recognize it at first. Like for what the reason that he knew it for, which was like I guess back in the day there was like a Wally preview that they showed, and they used the music Brazil to open up the Wally movie.
Oh, interesting. I don't know that.
No, they didn't open up the Wally movie. They opened the trailer up with Brazil, the theme song from Brazil in the trailer. So I thought that was kind of interesting because no, this Brazil, that song that never really stood out to me as a song that I should be familiar with in other media.
I did appreciate that song being used in all the other themes. One particular is when they're in the Ministry of Information Retrieval after Sam gets his job and they're walking around the top with his boss, having the mob behind him, and Sam's looking for his boss, but he just keeps seeing the people running across back and forth, and the music's like very hectic, but underneath it all, it's still Brazil. I really liked how they were able to take that like that tone and just like continue it throughout the film, regardless of the circumstances, and make it fit. That was pretty clever. Yeah. So the other book I'm trying to remember. I think it was Brave New World is the other one. So it's like if you took 1984 and Brave New World and you kind of mushed them together, you'd get a little bit of this.
I've never seen Brave New World, but isn't that Aldous Huxley?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's either that one or Fahrenheit 151. I read all these back a long time ago, and I don't remember which one's which anymore. They kind of blend together unless you keep up on them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I really liked a lot of the subtones in this film that were happening, because I feel like that was almost as much of the story as the actual story itself. Because if you look at the story, lots of things happen, but realistically, it's just Sam trying to get to and save Jill Layton.
Yeah, Kim Greist,
Mm-hmm.
who, after reading the Wikipedia, Gilliam was reportedly dissatisfied with the performance. I don't think I had that experience with her. I thought she did a decent job, but I guess he was looking for something else at the time.
Her the way she read the care for a little necrophilia line didn't just get right for him, you know. That was hilarious. So the story itself, yeah, I like it. It's not overly complicated. It's just all the subtones and like the little bits of
Exactly, yeah.
things happening underneath it that are really like, this world is messed up, and it's not.
It's out there, man. There's a lot of stuff that's just out there. I'm looking at them doing their shopping right now, and then there's just a lady completely wrapped in wraps. I have no other word for her post-op surgery of like plastic surgery. Like they're in the department store, and she's just holding on to comedically enough, a skinless dog, and her face is wrapped up. So it's like that dichotomy of like an animal who should have fur doesn't have fur, and a human who has wraps on their face when they shouldn't have wraps on their face. It's just like there's a lot of like wildness and weirdness in this film. I think I'm at the part, but I'm not quite sure if I am when they're in the department store. I wrote down the lady's panties caused an explosion. There's like an explosion caused by ladies' panties.
I don't know that the panties caused the explosion. I don't remember that. I
No,
remember that
she popped up. That's why I wrote it down, because she was showing that she is buying lingerie for herself, and then right as soon as she showed her red lingerie, there was like a massive explosion. Which, yeah, man, like thinking about it now, it's kind of scary. Like how some of these terrorist acts kind of fall into reality. Because I mean, obviously, we live in a heinous world at times, and people just want to see the world burn. And so, seeing a random explosion during a time of happiness, I mean, one, it's Christmas time in this movie. Two, people are just doing routine Christmas shopping, and then out of fucking nowhere, they just get exploded due to terrorism. And terrorism is never the answer when trying to get your message out there.
Yeah.
It shouts the loudest, it screams the loudest, it gets the most attention, but there's better ways to do it, and I hate that. Like that. It's like
I think this movie suggests a couple different times that the terrorism is not true. It's not actually terrorism that's happening.
people are getting hurt, man.
Yeah, they are getting hurt. I think that the idea here is that terrorism is being used as a form of control, to keep people scared. Because I think it was Jill who has the question. She's like, you keep the world safe from terrorists, but have you ever seen a terrorist? Have you ever seen a terrorist? Have you ever seen one terrorist? And she asked like that.
I see what you're saying. Like they're implementing these random moments of fear So that way it keeps the people in line to be like, yeah, we're protecting you from these things.
Exactly. And but the same people who are protecting him are also the ones who end up doing the hurting. Like as we see with Buttle, he dies because of their protecting. So it's like, what is the protection worth when you're not certain who you're being protected from, but the people doing the protecting are hurting you?
That's crazy.
Because that's what I got is like they're bombing all these random things, and like the rich people are always just insulated enough from it, just enough, and it's probably the regular folks who are always getting hurt. In the department store, I can't remember. That was the first time I saw Sam react to the people getting hurt, right? Because he had seen the police guy catch on fire right beforehand, and then he goes to this department store. He watches the bomb happening, and he finally understands. Oh my God, people are hurt. Oh my God, people are hurt. We have to help them. I would be curious because I would bet that the people who are getting hurt are just the normal shoppers, whereas like the lady who has the lingerie, she's one of the wealthy people, and somehow she's always away from it. Which her dying and her getting her body poured out of the coffin, that was part of the dream, right?
Who died?
The lady who had the acid bath cosmetic surgery. He walked into a funeral, and I think this was during him in the imagination land. He walks into the funeral and he goes in, and they open up the coffin because the police stormed the funeral, and she just like gets poured out of it, which is a really nifty effect. I thought it was pretty funny. And that's when his mom looks just like Jill Layton, because she had finally gotten her wraps off after the surgery, and she was talking to those dudes. Again, just super clever like imagery. That part I don't really know all of what it stands for, but hilariously visual, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that people would enjoy watching, it's just the randomness and like the set designs and like the visual aspect of this film. Because there's a lot of not props, but just great set design and great costume designs. And I mean, I think that's what Terry Gilliam, one of his strong suits, is his ability to use props and sets to the fullest and make it fun and unique, but not too crazy and out there where it's hard to kind of believe what you're seeing. Like everything in this world seems to fit.
And that's like, it's so hard to make it fit. Like he had to have gone all the way with this movie, otherwise it wouldn't have worked. I do love that about it, is that almost nothing looks like it does in the real world, and yet it feels like a real world because almost nothing looks like it does.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that they got going on in this doesn't look like it would work in our current day. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't trying to look to future.
No way, dude. The computer screens barely make any sense for that case.
Like, I don't think he was trying to future predict what the world would look like. But I think what he was trying to do was just trying to make it as out there, but yet understandably make sense in that world. So he did a good job.
Yeah, the only thing that I think that like really looks like the real world, where there's two things, I guess, is I don't know that this is like the actual right culture, so I might be wrong about this, but like I think it's the samurai warrior outfit in the dreams of the Sam's representation of himself and his actual guilt and his actual responsibility. That's like from the real world, and then also in Sam's dreams, the pastures. Those are the two things that look like the most real. And it's funny that they both exist in Sam's dreams as opposed to in the reality that he lives in.
Yeah, because Sam's dreams have moments of blending into reality. Like, there was a brief moment where during the explosion, he must have had like not some impact, but like some type of like, what's that thing where people shell shock? He probably has some instance of shell shock because in the time when he was at the department store, he he drifted into the dream world because like that Bushido samurai guy came out of nowhere for like an instance, but like it was just showing that like his worlds are blending together, like the reality and the dream world are blending together, and it's crazy to have watched this and then also be watching this other thing on Apple TV called Severance. Have you been seeing any marketing for the show Severance?
No, I've heard about it, but I haven't seen anything in
You should
regards
check
to
it
it.
out. It'd be something that I think you would enjoy. I know you have to get on an Apple TV, so I'm not sure if you want to do that, Apple Plus, but uh,
That's
it's
been the
like
hesitance, yeah. But no, I mean, I've heard really good things about it. It looks
it seems
interesting.
like a show you would be into, and watching Severance and this movie together, you could see what feels like a lot of influence coming from each other because like there's a lot of things that like in Severance that separate the mind from reality. Like they literally take out a part of your brain to have you pretend that you're actually at work, but in reality your real life body isn't doing what your little person in your mind is doing. Like it's a weird show. I'm only on episode 4, but it kind of plays into this like what part of Sam is stuck in a dream state and what part is stuck in reality sometimes.
And I take it. This is just like if I had to guess the reasoning behind that, because I think prior to that scene that you're talking about, he had mostly been in reality where the dream state was pretty separate.
Yeah.
And then after he watched the policeman burning is where I
Yeah.
think you really see again, like once he saw the consequences of his action, the dissonance that he had between reality and his like vision of what he is actually doing shattered a little bit, and it broke him. And that's where like because the samurai ends up being a representation of Sam himself, right? And he is fighting.
Samurai.
See, there it is.
Well, that's something, dude.
It might have been. He's like, his name is Sam, and he's fighting a samurai because it's Sam. I can see that, and like the person he sees as the samurai is the cop, but like in his dreams, the samurai is him. So what he's seeing is himself as that person, and he tries to fight it, right?
Samurai.
Yeah.
Samurai.
And it wouldn't that would track because of the whole "Here I am, JH" Jeremiah thing. So it's not like Terry was against using the ambigrams or whatever they're called.
Oh, for sure. So I'm going with that, man. We cracked that one. I'm sticking with that theory. That's what it is. He's fighting himself. And isn't that what we're always doing? And sometimes in our dreams, where we're constantly fighting ourselves at times because we want to do the things we want to do in our dreams, but we can't because something in our dream is keeping us from doing that thing. And so that's just our inner self trying to keep us from doing what we want to do. Sometimes we're just supposed to stay in line with what the world around us seems fit.
And again, this is where like that imagination of just like a middle-aged person makes a lot of sense, right? Is like he's imagining himself actually finally doing it, but like he listens to the imagination so much that he ends up ostracized from the society that he had built up around him. Which is rough because I think if you look at it and like if you sat with that idea for a while, it'd probably be pretty true of most people who have ended up in careers that they didn't necessarily dream of, right?
Dude, a random thing that popped into my head while watching this movie that has nothing to do with the movie almost entirely, but just a random thought that like how for the most part, from what I can tell and remember, that most British people say lift, right? When they're talking about an elevator, they take the lift.
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes sense. It's a lift. It's like lifting you up. But like with an escalator, I think I saw escalators in this. What do they call an escalator? Did they always like lifting stairs? Like would they call an elevator? Much like how we do, and what they call escalators? much like we do. You don't have to answer. It was just a rhetorical, like a random thought I had, like lifting stairs. Take the lifting stairs, or what it is called, escalators. Random thought. You don't have to answer to it. You don't have to add to it. I just wanted to add that.
No, that's fair. I mean, you know, like the British, like just the differences in vernacular, kind of like on display here a few times. Like when they call the trucks the lorries, you know.
Was that what they call the? They were calling the trucks lorries.
Yeah. So like they're like, oh yeah, well we could go in your lorry, and I'm just like, right, it's the truck.
So
Or every
while
time they
we
called his
share
apartment a
the same
flat, and I'm like,
language,
is
there's
it really
certain words
flat?
that
I don't know,
don't
man.
translate. I always have a fun
Yeah,
time
and I'm,
watching like British films or British like anything British per se, just because I like to see the differences in how we speak.
mm-hmm. My favorite has always been the boot for the trunk of a car.
Yeah, put it in the boot.
Yeah, put it in the boot. I've also got my kids saying overmorrow, which is the day after tomorrow.
The day after tomorrow,
Yeah,
overmorrow.
it's
Is that a
overmorrow.
common phrase? And
I've heard it a few different times now, so I just decided to start using it. So now Dino calls it the overmorrow, and that shit's hilarious to me.
yeah, that's such a random word usage because I don't ever think of the day after tomorrow. I just normally think of tomorrow when speaking to someone. I'm never like, we get on the overmorrow. Today was Wednesday. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about Friday. I would never go. I would just say, "Hey, on Friday," but it's funny that they use that you and they use overmorrow.
Right, it's just one of those words that it's like, oh, it has a strong meaning and it makes a lot of sense. Just funny. In the movie, they're all relying on machines they don't know, and bureaucracy they don't understand. So much so that they can't just get things done, which is why Harry Tuttle exists and why he's also an outlaw. They do a good job of showing them like using sports and language to obfuscate facts. So like in this case, we'd be talking about like when Mr. Buttles found that he's dead. They never really use the word dead.
Or
They use like delete it or lost or like rescind it or something, you know, and then that's just like, well, why don't they just call him dead? And I think that was one of the bureaucrats saying that. I think it was Ian Holmes' character, Krutzman. And then also Mr. Helpman in the beginning. I think it was the very beginning when he's talking about current events and he's using all these sports metaphors so much so that it stops making any sense. I forget the exact ones he used. I just wrote he was using vague, confusing sports metaphors when he was in that interview. So that way he didn't actually have to answer questions. Again, it was like the little details like this where I was like, I think this is fantastically done. The vacuum says hello.
elbow the shit out of my vacuum. Sorry, listeners.
Yeah. So I really liked the background stuff and the little stuff and the stuff they were showing off throughout without making like an actual arrow sign pointing to saying this is the point of what we're showing here.
Yeah. Like,
Um,
there's enough in this film for you to rewatch it and to find hidden signs, subtext, theories.
there's that whole entire like dream purpose where Sam's not even saying words. His mouth is moving. He's not even saying words. Like they have him just quiet because they're like the imagery shows enough. Don't worry about what he's saying. It doesn't even really matter. Which I something I wanted to do is that there's a director commentary on the Blu-ray that I got, and I wanted to go through that scene and just listen to the director commentary, but I didn't end up doing it yet because I wanted to see kind of like what Terry's thoughts were about not having Sam's words audible, and I guess this was all part of his imagination while he's about to be tortured. So maybe that was the idea, is that like he's not actually saying anything, he's not hearing himself. And the special effects were just pretty phenomenal the whole way through, including the creature designs, like the baby face rope carriers that were holding the cage, terrifying looking. All the cool cameras and stuff looked so cool.
Which part?
In one of Sam's dreams, but it also bleeds into real life a little bit. Has Jill is in a cage, being held by rope carriers on the ground, who are
Yeah.
like weird baby face mask monstrosities.
Okay. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Just really, really cool creature design in that case, and then also with the props and everything he has to signify the future. Just really cool special effects design in general. Like whoever they got to make the art for this stuff, very creative.
No, yeah, for sure. And while on the topic of his dream state, there's so much. I think that's where most of obviously that's the area where you have the most room for illusion and metaphors and some. And one that sticks out for me right now is the whole moment where I think it's during this time where they're pulling Jill's character in that cage, and uh, I think what's his face is trying to reach up to it. Sam's trying to reach up to it, but he's being pulled down by what I think is Ian Holm, Sam's boss.
Oh yeah, the rock monster
The
thing.
rock monster. And it's just like a metaphor of him being like held down because he's being forced to. Oh, yeah, he's essentially feel like he's being forced to stay with Ian Holmes where he works because he doesn't want Sam to take that promotion.
Well, and that was like when after Ian Holm had forged the signature, right?
I think so. Yeah, he already signed for him.
He's like, "Well, you said to do it."
And one thing while we're still on the subject, on the subject of the dreams, there was a moment where I didn't, for the longest time, sometimes, like I said, I can't tell when reality blends into the dream sometimes. And one of those moments is when Sam says, "I've killed you," and shows Jill the picture of her file, and it just says delete. And then Jill's character uh, very nonchalantly says, "Care for some necrophilia."
Yeah, I mean, that was like so that the swell of music right after she says "care for a little necrophilia" was hilarious. Now, that was an important moment because that was supposed to be like the ultimate, like, okay, well, we're no longer bound to these rules that they have because you don't exist inside of their system, right? Like, and he used the delete metaphor because earlier on when they were talking about Buttle, that's the same thing they had said about him is that he had been deleted, and that's when they found out he was dead. So that's like he'd come back and he's like, "I deleted you. We're good to go. We're all safe now." And she took that
Flying
as
up to the
dead.
sky and never relive that path.
Yeah, and then them doing like when he's like, "Yeah, she died resisting arrest," and he's like, "Oh, I did that. Don't worry, we're good." And they're like, "But strangely enough, it happened twice." I was like, "It's pretty." The the dream world for me was interesting. I I can understand why he's flying in the dream world, right? Because that makes it pretty clear it's a dream world. Do you think everyone in the '80s just dreamed that they were a WWE star? Like, is that why his hair is all pushed back and he's got the face makeup?
Possibly. This might be, I'm not sure when wrestling became the most popular, but it definitely had moments of like grandiose, larger than life, and the air just added to it, I suppose. And what's more larger than life in real life than wrestlers? Wrestlers are the closest thing to being real life superheroes because what they do is fake, but not all the way 100% fake. So I haven't been into wrestling in a long time, but back in the day, man, those were my superheroes.
Yeah, and they get to just like shout things at each other and then like, you know, fight the people who they're mad at. It's like a level of like emotional freedom that they must have.
Yeah,
Um, the Justice Department after they've taken Sam away, and they take him to the Justice Department. You get to see like this kind of initial talking to by what would I assume would be the prosecutor, right? Who's like, "Hey, you should just say you're guilty."
The baby face?
No, not the baby face. Before the baby face, so, like when he's in the offices, and you can see all of the other people who are also in suits like him, the silhouettes in the background moving past it, and he's talking to what I assume would be the prosecutor, just saying like, "Hey, just admit you're guilty. You're just guilty, right? It's cool, just you're guilty, because if you don't, it's going to cost a lot of money. I mean, these things cost a lot of money. You're wasting our money. So admit you're guilty." I love the quote, "If you hold out too long, you'll jeopardize your credit rating." Again, like I've studied the criminal system, and it's kind of funny, and it's also like a little terrifying how realistic that is. But it was such a good line delivered at the exact right moment.
A moment that holds true to this day.
Yeah, well, if you hold out too long, you'll jeopardize your credit rating. Just another system in which they can remove blame from themselves to say it's actually the credit system you got to worry about, not us.
Yeah, I was just going through the whole Wikipedia thing, and it was just interesting to see that this movie has had a life outside of the film. Like people have used this as a reference point for a lot of their stuff. Have drawn inspiration from a lot from this movie, which is quite interesting. One example is when the ending of this film was used as an ending in a Rick and Morty episode that I didn't quite catch until after reading the Wikipedia. Even after watching the movie, I did connect the dots because the ending of this film was kind of confusing to me at first. But after reading the Wikipedia where it says at the end of Brazil, is referenced throughout a subplot involving a character attempting to escape the wafer factory where he works. Yeah, this is the Rick Lanchas mix-up where I guess there's like somebody who works at the wafer factory. He thinks he's escaping, but in reality he is captured, but lives with the illusion that he has escaped. So it's kind of that ending, and this was kind of like the ending I thought I was getting when he was having his escape, but later in the film we fade back into seeing him into the chair, and it just like fades with the song Brazil, I think, right? Like back in the clouds, kind of like back where we started. Jack and the guy who helped give him the promotion, I forget his name. Hellman, yeah. Are looking at what's his face? Sam just sitting there mindlessly staring out into what he thinks is his life, but in reality, everyone else around him is still living the world that they've been living in. They just put him in a forever dream state, which I don't know. Is that the worst way of living? Like if the rest of your life you're just stuck in a chair, pretending you're living the life you're living.
No, it's like the old Matrix argument. Would you rather be Cypher, who's like plug me back in, or would you rather be Neo, who's like take me back out?
Easy. Yeah, I like the idea of freedom and free choice, but like wouldn't it be just easier sometimes to just be plugged in and just led to believe you live the world you actually do want to live?
Well, you can see that with the wealthy folks in here, is that they're living through their life plugged in because everyone's doing their best to hide everything that's negative from them. So I guess in their case, they'd say, yeah, that is the best.
I can see why this movie heavily influenced the movie Sucker Punch. I haven't seen or talked about the movie Sucker Punch in a long time, but that movie was pretty dumb back in the day when I watched it, and I think it's probably doesn't hold up. But I remember that movie being partly like this, where you're living in this reality, but then when she was dancing, that's when she started doing this like all this crazy shit in her mind of like destroying the place she lived, the place that she was trapped in. But yeah, I don't have anything too much extra to add. The last few things I'll say is that the budget on this film was pretty high. It's 15 million, and they only made back 9.9 million in the U.S. It could be more on a wider distribution.
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that Britain and England would be his probably bread and butter. Terry Gilliam, although he's an American guy, I think he was mostly known prior to this for Monty Python. It's just a guess, though, because I also don't see it. I mean, it's like dystopian films. You hear a lot about them, but how many people want to watch them?
Yeah, people don't want to get too heady with the film. People just like drama and suspense. And this movie
Mm-hmm.
is kind of hard for people to like want to sit down and watch. Like as beautiful as it is and how, layered as it is, I don't think enough people would get inspired or would want to get not inspired but not get uh, excited to want to watch this.
It's the hard part for this movie with like marketing it for me is the name Brazil doesn't do it any favors. It's a strong name, but like it has no tie-in to the movie other than the fact that it has the song in it. Like nothing in here makes me think of South American country.
No, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So one side note I want to make is that Kim Greist, where I've seen her before, is that she was in the movie Manhunter. If you haven't seen Manhunter and you are interested, it is directed by Michael Mann. It is based on the Red Dragon book from the Hannibal Lecter Red Dragon book. And it is a phenomenal movie. And she plays Molly Graham, Will Graham's wife in the film. And goodness, if you haven't seen that, you should watch Manhunter. I love that movie. All right, so
Okay.
I take it that you're good to go. All right. I'll go ahead and I'll go first here. It's one of the more imaginative films that I've seen, and that is something that I love to search out. Brazil is packed full of visual charm and tonal oddity. The oddity itself plays very well towards the overall goal of achieving a dystopia that feels real and farcical at the same time. It's something that seems like it should be absurd, but the sort of absurd that you can just kind of picture realistically happening. Everything that happens is the result of someone else's actions, and the absolute worst thing that can happen is the dissonance being threatened between what they did versus what they wanted to believe they did. I think I haven't seen any other movies like this, and it's a movie that feels different depending on where your mind is at. I think that's a strong positive for it. So I give the story a 4, acting a 5, creativity a 5, pacing a 4, music a 4. That hits it at an 8.8. I'm rounding it up to a 9. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, this movie did a lot of things great. The set design, to the costume design, to the story design. Like, there's a lot of layers to this film that can't be said all in one podcast. Go ahead and give this one a watch if you're into those dreamlike. I wanted to say fantasy because I mean, what is a dream if not just a fantasy? But the fantasy that this character falls into ends up leading him down a road that some may find beauty while others might find insanity. Because again, I could see both sides like wanting to live in a world where all you do is dream, but at the same time, all you're doing is dreaming, so nothing feels real, nothing is real. And there's something dark and scary about that reality. That being said, I did enjoy this film. There is a lot going on with this film. I have been really enjoying Terry Gilliam's catalog so far, and I'm excited to see the third installation of this trilogy of imagination. But with this one, I'm giving the drama a 7 out of 10, the comedy aspect a 5 out of 10. There was a love story, I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10 love story. The romance didn't feel forced, and you felt bad for him in the end being pulled away from what it seems like his dream love, which is sad. And 4.5 on like suspense thriller, and a 10 out of 10 for absurd and dreamlike fever dream experience that I had watching this. But overall, with that arbitrary and absurd rubric of numbers that I just passed out, I'm feeling like 7.5 to like 8, like closer to an 8 on this film. I just thought it was well done and well executed. And Terry Gilliam, I'm excited to see the adventures of that movie. I don't know the name of your movie on the next one, but I'll get it on the next pod. But the next pod, the Over Morrow pod. Because on the next pod, what are we watching, Nick?
So yeah, for the next pod, we are going to watch a movie that the time it was released is apparently debated on the internet. It is either 2022, 2023, or 2024, but it is a movie called Hundreds of Beavers. You may hear the kids in the background screaming. I apologize. It's in their nap time right now. But so we're going to watch Hundreds of Beavers. It is an independent comedy movie that has just some of the most rave reviews I've ever seen from people who've watched it. And it looks very unique. You can find it on Amazon Prime Video if you haven't heard of it and you want to watch it before our next pod. Or of course it's on Blu-ray. Just saying. Check it out. Hundreds of Beavers. That'll be the next one that's coming up. Till then, we're all in this together.
Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to Additional Crew Film Review. If you like this content, please check out our other episodes, and otherwise, please subscribe, give us a good rating. All these things help us to be seen a little bit more. We do have a letterboxed name is Additional Crew Film Review.